Okay, so this is our second section on Treatise in White Magic. We are on page
35.
Is it 35? Okay.
36 in my book. 36 into 37 we're going into.
Okay, and which section? So anybody who wants to.
Because that's where I last highlighted something.
D, okay. Soul is the perceiving entity through the union of spirit,
Mhm.
Father, Spirit, Mother, Matter. Okay, and now, Donnie, there was a comment you made about a question.
Well, on page 35, we talked about the soul is another name for the Christ principle, whether in nature or in man. There's a lot to unpack there. That's the basis for the world religions, essentially. And Christianity, there's a lot. There's so much there. I don't even know what to say, but Christianity doesn't talk about the soul necessarily, but it focuses on Jesus and Christ. So the gap from getting to, putting those two together is telling. I don't know. It's a huge jump. If we could just realize that, that would be a giant thing. I think that, I don't know. It's just, there's a real lot there. You could write a book about the Christ principle being another name for the soul.
That's probably what Alice Bailey's 20 books are all about.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. That's that's serious business right there.
Well, and we probably would have gotten an elaboration of that if they had chosen early on in the first early centuries the opposite choice. There was the two choices. Is man a union? Does he make the divine union with the soul and that union, which is what Christ did? Or the choice that Christianity made was, no, he was the Son of God and he was born that way, and there was only one of him, and there's only going to be one of them, versus what the Nestorians were talking about was making that union of man and God, or making this connection that we're now talking about here, which then and so I'm going to come down to the abstracted geometric one and say you work your way to that spiritual triad, and then you're up in this realm that gives you the divine qualities that put the two together for mankind in terms of his evolutionary process on that, using that chart diagram we're talking about to make yourself up to the top, which was the 6 initiations, and then the 7th is gets you ready to make an exit. It's by that time you've chosen where you're going, because you have done everything there is to do here. But that was not the choice that was made. That really wasn't a practical one, because the way it was demonstrated 2,000 years ago was you got yourself on a cross and got pounded onto a cross and died. And that's how you got there, so that you could come back. A very hard sell. Well,
the other hard sell on that, for me, and not hard sell, but The church has really pushed at it. All the work's been done. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to change. There's some issues modern day, not some, there's a lot built into that. So it's just,
Yeah. Well, no, it was, in other words, but what I'm saying is in the 2000 years ago, for the push to be, look, look, this was a great guy. Here's what he told us. Here's what he did. And you're supposed to do the same type of thing, because technically you are. When you go through these initiations, you do face death as a possibility. And you've got to play that one 100%. And you can't cheat, okay? Because it's you internally. So what the real death is, it's a death to the smaller world that you're living in to open up into a larger one. But you don't know when you're going there what's going to transpire. So in other words, you do give up the electromagnetic, it's called the ring pass knot, the whole area of your influence and everything that's connected to it, to walk over that threshold. And that's the dweller on the threshold, is all of this that you have built, all of this that you are connected to, that won't let you go forward because you're in love with whatever all this is and you can't let it go. You're not willing to let it go. That's the dweller. Everything you have created that holds you back. And in order to release from that psychologically, you have to be willing to release from it all. And that's where you, like I said, you can't cheat on this one. You have to be willing to do that. So that is in itself a death, a willingness to die. Okay, because you don't know what's on the other side of this thing. And I'm saying 2000 years ago, that was the hard sell. How could you create a movement where they saw the guy get pounded on a cross out in front of everybody, so everybody knew, and he died? As far as most people are concerned, there was a group of followers who have this other experience of him in the resurrection. So that's what I mean when I say it was a hard sell, is if you were going to coalesce around something, it's got to be simpler for the peasantry, because they're not going to go that route. They're going to hang with what they had, whatever version that was of whatever they believed, whether it was paganism or I don't know exactly what everybody was experiencing or practicing in those days. Everybody always has some form of, they have their kitchen gods, or they have this, or they have that, whatever. But that was really hard to market. And so ultimately the winner was, hey, there's only one of him and you have to follow him. And the way you follow him is you go through us to follow him. We got the books, we got the manuscripts. They can't read for the most part, most people in those days. If the educated ones were the ones who sat these small groups and they were downtown in a storefront, so to speak, or literally in front of one with a teacher, a Plato or an Aristotle or some other teacher. But those people paid, those kids were paid students to this teacher. There was nothing like the schools we have now and the requirements for education. So it was a whole different world. So to say that, and then it was turned into blasphemy, right? If you said anything like this, that was blasphemous, which I'm sure people lost their heads and whatever else put them in fire, whatever, got rid of them.
Became
So, yeah.
gladiators, thrown to the lions, literally.
Oh, talking about, can I tell a little story?
Of course.
In Naples, they have San Gennaro, their patron saint. And this was back, I don't remember how many centuries back, but it was a long ways back. And so, you know, they like saints and stuff like that, but they don't like them when they're really saints, because then they can be dangerous and threatening, you know. So anyway, they wanted to get rid of this guy, and they threw him to the lions, but the lions wouldn't eat him. And there were a couple of other things that happened that they couldn't get rid of him. So finally, I think they just crucified him, something to that effect. But the bottom line was they tried to get rid of him, but none of these things were working because he was probably truly a saint. So now they have his blood in a vial. It's in Naples. I've seen the church, and every year, I'm assuming they still do it, but they certainly did it after World War II. They want it to liquefy. And if it liquefies that year, then Naples is going to have a good year. And if it doesn't, then that's precondition that it's not going to be an easy year for Naples. Okay, because that is their patron saint, and that is the prognostication for the year. But they tried to get rid of him in many ways. They just couldn't. So finally, they just nailed him good. But because they couldn't have a saint like that around that was invulnerable to the conditions of everybody else, because then he was an unknown entity and more powerful. So it was the people who got rid of him. You know, the church had tried, and like I said, put him in with the lions and stuff, hoping that would do it, and it didn't work. So finally, the people took the power in their own hands and got rid of him, because they also could not tolerate that. Anyway, that's a story off market, but from what you were saying, Donnie, but something you had said reminded me of that. Yeah. So anyway, any other comments now that, yeah, we know they didn't choose to follow this, but you know, we have a lot more organized society that we have now, though, than we certainly did through Europe from the 0 AD to the year 2000. I mean, the organizational level of Europe itself and the educational level of its populace and their awareness and so on and so forth, and communication levels are so much different that would have been a tough push. But there were always a few who made it. And a lot of them, I think, became monks or nuns and were tucked away. Now, anybody read Teilhard Chardin? I'm probably pronouncing his wrong, and I don't pronounce French right. A Jesuit.
A little.
Catholic. He was, Pascal was one of his relatives. Anyway, if you want to, some of his work is like reading DK. But what they did with him was the first thing he wrote, they asked him to resign. Okay, the Pope. And of course, he's a Jesuit. So he's in Rome, he's across, they used to call that the Black Pope, the head of the Jesuits. And they're across from the Vatican. They all function in the same area. And he would not resign. Okay. And he was a paleontologist, I believe. So they sent him out here or there to do something. And during prior to World War II, just prior to it, they sent him to China, and he was stuck in China through all of World War II. But you start reading his material, and I mean, yeah, a lot of it would be a companion to this in terms of ideology and concept and all of that. And they would never allow him to publish any of his books. And basically, I don't know if they slipped one or two easy ones in before he died, but they got some of his stuff published after he died. And that's interesting material. And he had one called, I'm not sure of the exact title now. I have a copy of the book, but it's his science. He coordinates things with science, and the church, so on and so forth, and some of that. But anyway, but for the most part, yeah, they didn't go too far. I mean, well, Galileo, you know, you questioned any of that and you were gone. If you were not under house arrest, you had permanent arrest. Yeah. But we have a little awareness now and a little bit of openness, and so this is a good time to study. And now China has come back, you know, and made a statement about a year, I believe it was August, not this August, the August before, when they had their Congress, I don't think it was called the Comintern. I think it was just their major the CCP meeting, and she said that he wanted only the science and the state. That's all he wanted. No hocus pocus, none of this imaginary stuff, which he kept classified Muslim and Christianity in. And he's most definitely gone after Christianity again, because I think he burned the buildings and the books. And of course, he's got a lot of the Muslims out in the desert. But other than that, the world is probably still open to entertaining various ideologies. But science, just science and the state, I don't think is going to cover this material either. So that's another thing we have to look forward to, is whether that's going to try to shut all of this down again. And then we have people who don't think we need this, who you know, they just want to plug everybody's minds up to computer chips and for some of them, probably the more elite, I think they feel they've got control of how they can keep replacing these body parts physically so they can live forever, literally, because they put a lot of their mind functioning on computer parts or chips or however they're going to design it, and then keep this body, the organic part of it, functioning and alive and renewed, so that, in fact, I heard it put well. Someone had said they don't want to go through the living and dying and the reincarnation to grow and evolve. They don't want to do that at all. They just want to live in the status we've got now in this world, and just keep this one going and never have to die from the body they got now. Yeah, so that's another set of thoughts that are out there at the moment. And you're going to see a lot of stuff flashing around during the changing of an age, because all the energy that was utilized during the age of Pisces, when that was our backdrop of our solar system, is waning now, because we're moving into a backdrop of the age of Aquarius. So that energy is withdrawing, which you can see the anything Christianity created is fading. It's a little bit like the Lord of the Rings, you know, anybody watch the movies? When I think it's Kate Blanchett, initially she comes out and she says, you know, there's the changes and I can smell it in the air and I can feel it in the and this age, all that's there is gone, and it's a changing of the age, and that's what that movie depicted, was that time shifting in that case from the the fairies and that level, that realm, to the age of man. And in fact, when you talk about quality, does anybody see those movies very or once or a lot, or anybody like
And I've seen Lord of the Rings, but I don't. Yeah.
I had to read the books in high school.
Oh, okay. Well, the one who represents man in this Fellowship of the Rings, which is Boromir, who goes down early. He has a brother, Faramir, and the dad is telling Boromir to show his qualities and get the ring. And he's always downgrading the second son because he can never produce the winds and so on and so forth that he feels the first son can do. So the first son goes to get the ring, of course, and that's his demise. The second one has a shot at the ring because he ends up with Frodo, and has to figure out what to do with him. And but the dad always says, show your quality. So I want to bring this back to this quality, word equality. So Faramir is going to send the ring to his dad, and with a message that Faramir is showing his quality. Boom. And then he realizes before he actually does that there is no way that ring can save them, which is what the dad wants, because he thinks if he has it, then he has the power to defend against Saruman. So he lets Frodo go. And one of his upper military guys, he says, you know, if you do that, your the charge for that is death. And so Faramir says, then my life is forfeit. Okay, you see, and that is a mini version of this. You have quality and you stand behind your quality, whatever it is. And quality is a characteristic and definition of the soul, what the quality is. So, and the quality literally of anything on this planet, because this is all a creation that we're working with here of consciousness in this system. So we're working in quality and building in quality and developing quality. And you develop it all the way up through all those levels and interaction with all of that energy that you're going to absorb. So let's talk for a minute, and Donnie, I'm coming back to you for this, because you were the one who wanted everything really quickly originally. Yeah, talk to this. Can't hear you. Are you there now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. What would you like? What do you want? What are you talking about?
This was speeding this up. And now you realize it's a very slow process.
It's a little slow for me. Yeah. I sense it becomes apparent though. And then I think it also becomes apparent why it's slow. And it's a process of getting relaxed and then learning to enjoy it, right? And then love it, and then just keep growing with it. And it gives opportunity for our benefit. as opposed to rushing it and then missing out on all of the experience that we did need. We just can't get out without having all of that experience we need, basically. And that takes time. Right?
Yeah, and if you look at that chart and you hit one of those significant points, then you're hitting an energy connection that you're going to need. But it's, again, like you're not going to stand there and have the atom opened up and you're going to take the blast and be fine. So you make a connection, and then it's a very slow feed of that energy filling into your system and becoming part of you. With it comes information and awareness that he talks about here as well. I think, didn't we read last week? It's kind of, this is above your pay grade right now. I'm super okay. Well, this is the build that moves your pay grade up, but it's slow and it's subtle, because it really needs to be. We don't move that fast here in terms of total. How many of you could just up and move and totally change your life 180? You gonna bail on your kids? You gonna bail on the life you've got to just do a 180? You know, we generally are not willing to do that.
Willing and it happening, I think, would be different though, right? If you're willing, you're still not going to do it.
Well, then
because nobody's going to make you up, and I'm ready. Whatever comes, I'm ready right now, but I don't, I'm just rolling with this.
Good excuse, huh? I'm just rolling with this.
That's all I got. It's the best I can do.
No, but it's got to be a slow transition, and then it's solid. And that's why in that connecting consciousness, he says it comes, this energy, and it will hit you for a couple of minutes or a couple of hours, and then it dissipates on its own. You're changed forever. But I mean, now there are some people probably in that book that he defines who, and maybe Whitman was one of them, because he makes a remark about Whitman. He felt Whitman let this energy control him rather than Whitman controlling the energy. And I think Bucke felt he controlled the energy more. He was aware of it, but he controlled the energy more, where Whitman would live in it. And I'm assuming he probably did not have, at that point, a family or a lot of other responsibilities. Well, it would be like Rumi. When I first looked at Rumi's material, and this was in the 60s, when we had people like R.D. Laing were just starting to investigate the people in the mental institutions to listen to what they were saying. And he heard that a lot of them are dealing in this realm that was just starting to open up, probably with the drug use in the 60s. It didn't mean those people in the mental institution had been using drugs before that. It was that they were plugged up into those realms, and they were, that's what they were talking about. That's what they were expressing. But so when I looked at Rumi, I thought, man, if this guy was alive today, they'd put him in a mental institution for sure. It would just be an absolute given that they would do that. And actually, I had a business that was on the street. It was open to the street on a sidewalk, a business location, but it was open to the street. And so I would be busy in the morning working, and the street people would be waking up and wandering down the street. And some of them talked very loud, and I would listen. and they had very logical arguments they were going through, and they were either religion or politics. Those were the two realms. But I could listen, and there were lines of logic in it for whoever they were having their dialogue with up there. It wasn't totally random, but they were up there. They weren't coming down, you know. And I think sometimes I think some of that, especially with drug use, happened with some of those people. They got up there and they couldn't get back. They just got stuck in certain sections, and then that's where their consciousness was functioning. But the path, and that's the other thing, that you need to be able to make that path and come back and ground it, and make that pathway and come back and ground it, and slowly, and just, you know, again, another reason, because I know you've complained at times earlier that this was, you either thought you were already up there, or, you know, that this was going too slow. We get all these side trips and arguments, but it has to be slow, and it has to be grounded. And the interesting thing is the fourth plane, the Buddhic plane, which is the place man ultimately goes. He doesn't go to the other comes to him. The fourth plane, the middle plane, is the plane he works towards. Then the downloads come to him when he's functioning on that plane. The interesting thing about the Buddhic plane is it is called the plane of pure reason. And when you look at the logos, and which is a terminology for God, and the logoic plane, and our word logic, it's telling you a lot. Yeah. So this material looks very complicated right now, and certainly the words are a new set of words, but this leads to a very rational mind, a very it's science. I mean, what is science looking for? It's looking for those patterns that are stable, that are consistent, that are the foundation of what we're living with. That's what this material is doing. And that's what the Aquarian age will do, is look for those, because we're now at a level where we can look, we've got the mental capacity to look on these realms. We haven't had that long, for that matter. So, so in that regard, this really shouldn't be scary, but for some people it seems to be. But that's, you know, they may well get over that fairly soon. And I've known people who've worked on this material for at least 50 years, okay? And I remember some of them saying not that many years ago, how will we ever get the people of today and the young interested in this material and to look at it? And I thought, you're missing the point. They're being taught the language in school right now. They're taught science. They're taught all the mathematics. They're taught all the basic foundation of what is underlying all of this, that leads it all to the same place. They just, religion, of course, rejected it all. So they're out in that regard. But that's where this leads to very rational thought. Nothing crazy. It's not hocus pocus or anything like that. It's sound. The good thing, as far as I'm concerned, about the Christianity is it preserved the basic principles in as much as the story of Christ. which demonstrates what you'll find eventually when we get into this, is the initiations, the high points you needed to go through, and the steps along the way to making that advancement. And his comments, you know, you will do greater works than I. What better sentence could he have made than to imply, hey, you know, you're coming this way too. As this material indicates, he's the first homegrown human being to accomplish this. In other words, he's homegrown from this planet. He made it all the way to the top. Our other avatars who were coming in to demonstrate, but they did not develop on this planet. Buddha did not develop his advancements that he demonstrated. Initially, he developed those elsewhere, but he came here to demonstrate. We didn't have anybody who could do that. So you did have avatars that would come every once in a while to point the next direction. So anyway, I've gone on long enough. So
You would have to, because there wasn't anyone homegrown to show anybody.
That's right. Yeah, we
Yeah.
hadn't gotten that to that point. I mean, I think we talked a little bit about this. We're really getting off track. Yesterday about the Lemurians, which was the first, you really had animal, and it got the first link to the mental realm. Okay, the first connection to the mental. But that was an animal. That was very much still an animal. And that was a tough one. They eventually, I think, kind of, they'd made the connection. You had a few who were advanced, but they were going in the wrong direction with their newfound capacities, is the best I can discern from what's been said. And that one, I think DK indicates what occurred there was you had the volcano on an island, and then the island sunk. And with it went pretty much that group, because it just, and they come back, but they plug in a little later when there's further development that's more in the direction it's meant to go. And the Atlanteans, it was the flood. So when that group, that's what they were called, I guess, at that point in time, according to the material. I wasn't there, so I don't know. But I can read this, and that's, and then it was the astral plane that was being developed. But again, evidently off on a direction that wasn't going to lead where humanity needs to go. Now, at least we're up to the mental realm. So unless we get some real wackos using their mental facilities to try to control everybody or something, and again, off on a direction that's not supposed to go, I don't think we should expect. I think, wasn't there a promise in the Bible there'd be no more floods and stuff?
Mm-hmm.
So frankly, with up, when you function on the mental plane and the capacity we have now, they can just target people, can't they?
Yeah.
Like they're starting to do that with viruses, right? That's what they're talking about now, is that they
That's the first time we lost Carla.
Okay, that wasn't just me. Okay. Because last week I lost you guys for like a minute or two.
target specific people anyway, but quality is what the soul is working on and developing, and then improving quality as you move up, so that you can have a level of communication, natural communication and interaction on whatever level you're on as you move up. and
We
to
did lose, I
maintain.
just want you to know, we did lose you there for just a sec, for about 15 seconds. So.
Okay. So what did I say during that 15 seconds?
Ah.
Develop and improve your soul quality.
Okay. So there you go. Maybe that's why it blanked out, right?
Yeah.
It was a test.
Yeah. Anyway, so what do you think, Melissa?
I have a lot of stuff like rolling through my head because there's so many things were said today, and it just brings me back to just what I went to school for, like did a lot of sociology, a lot of psychology. And when you talk, especially when you talked about when they went to the institutions, like in the 60s, obviously that was the deinstitutionalization period, where people are working on a higher plane. And so now they're out on the streets because to me, and I've worked with, I worked within the criminal justice system for, I mean, technically I'm still there, but as a probation officer for 15 years. So you dealt with a lot of mental health and a lot of people with mental health, or what would be classified as mental health issues, where maybe some of them may be just working, like you said, on a different plane, on a different level. So then it brings me back to even when you talk about the crucifixion or San Gennaro, where the people who are in power can't have these people out there trying to get that information, to others. So just in my head, I'm like, how many times could we have grown, or could we have developed a little quicker? But because there's this other group that's like, no, that's too powerful for us right now. Like, we're going to get rid of this person. We don't need them to speak that loud, because then it takes away from what we're trying to accomplish. So just in my head right now, it's just like, oh my gosh, this is why so much has happened in this world. And how many people would just be put aside as, oh, they're mentally ill, when they maybe just working on a different plane. And then, those who are trying to get the information out there, hold people back. So it's the same thing. I think maybe I talked about a couple of weeks ago, or maybe that first day that you and I and Donnie were on together, was about education of people, like not being able to read the books that they were given. So like, hey, we're going to spread the word. We can read, or we were rich enough to sit down with Plato, Aristotle, and go through all this stuff. So it become, what the limitation of education. So in my head, I was like, all right, but do we have to go through all of that to get us to the point where we are today? If you're talking about reincarnation or people being around within different periods, was that like their period of a lower level, and now we're moving up and up and up? But just it was when you were talking about how we may not all be at the same level, and we're not supposed to be. So everything's coming down. I feel like I'm not making any sense, but in my head, it's all going around to what we've talked about in the last couple of weeks, of just where we are personally, where some people still are and haven't moved up, but that's where they're supposed to be. And that we all aren't going to be on the same level at the same time. And then part of me is thinking, but there are those people that were holding everybody back from getting the information. So then I get angry about that. So I have like a little bit of like, these jerks, but much harsher words in my head. Like, how could you hold us back from improving the quality so we can move up the plane, improving our qualities? Like, how dare you hold people back? How dare you keep us from moving forward or learning?
How dare you lie to me?
How dare you? Like, how dare you? So I'm like, in my head, that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, how dare you hold people back from getting to where we need to go? But then in the same instance, I'm like, but do we have to go through that process to get there? I don't know. Like that's what's all playing in my head right now, is just piecing together as as we move on every week.
I call Carla the tension maker.
It's just, Yeah, that's I mean that's all that's popping through my head. So you know, as you were talking about, you know, trying to marketing Christianity, so to say, like, you know, that's a tough sell. You know, hey, this guy had to get crucified, and then we still had to build up, you know, his teachings and his works, and there were people trying to hold it back. And, you know, the idea of a heaven and a hell, to get you to that place. So it's just, again, unlearning what we were fed, what we were, you know, forced to learn or told, to kind of come up with the truth on our own. How dare you? How dare you hold me back from figuring it out earlier in life? But at the same time, is that where I'm supposed to be? So yeah, I feel all kinds of emotions right now about just knowing and you know, being able to develop and improve our quality, and other people not. So again, that just brings me back to, you know, to that, and how some people may think, if any of us, there's like this weird, if I were to talk about this with somebody and I'm like, oh God, she's gone crazy, you know, and then just kind of push aside and not listen to what's being said that might be a ring of the truth, we're all just moved to that, oh, they're just crazy, oh, they don't know what they're talking about, oh, they're, you know, and so you get labeled and you get pushed aside, and I think that holds people back as well from improving their quality, because there is this societal end of it where you don't want to be seen as an outsider, an outlier, like a crazy
Yeah, but
person.
those people are pushing you now to go further.
Yes. So it's
Well,
just,
and even if you think you're not having an effect, you actually are. Like, even if they think you're crazy, which who cares anyway? Like,
yeah.
when you're dropping those little seeds, like, they might go, oh, that's bullshit. But really, like, it's there. It's still there. You've still changed them, whether they're
Right.
willing to accept it or not. And who knows, like, maybe the next day or 10 years from that day, they'll go back to that information and think about it.
Yeah. Oh,
Like,
sorry.
whether they,
Cooking
so
downstairs.
Oh, I've
you're
thought
still
about
making-
every person that's ever said anything to me about God over my whole life. I've tried to look back and figure out where the nuggets
Yeah.
were planted, where the seeds were planted, or where, you know, but
yeah.
Well, that's, yeah. And then there's some things that are popping up within these last few weeks. I'm like, oh, I remember hearing about this like 15, 20 years ago. So the seeds were put, you know, seed, like you said, Melissa, the seeds are planted. It's just going to take some people longer,
Yeah.
a little longer to grow. So that's everything. Because even when you're talking about certain things, I'm like, yeah, I remember talking about this in college, which was long ago. Or I remember, you know, just having this conversation with somebody I met. You know, like you have those people that just come into your lives and kind of like affect you in a small way and turn out being a bigger way. Yeah. So
well, that is,
I'm sorry, my mother-in-law's cooking downstairs, so the alarm goes off in the entire.
Donnie muted himself.
no, I think it's mine. Is this
No,
yours or mine?
It's no, it's my house. It's
Oh,
listen, it's an old.
Her mother is
house.
setting the house on fire.
No, it's an old house, and the oven downstairs is horrible. I wish she would get a new one. But every once in a while, when she cooks something, like the alarm goes off in the entire house. Because it's a 4-family house, so it's like the whole house has to hear it. So my apologies. But
I hate to break out, but I have to get ready for
yeah, your birthday.
But
happy birthday.
thanks. I'm
Carl,
not sure how I feel. I'm not sure how I feel about his raging hormones, but I'll take it. I don't have a choice.
Carla, we didn't cover anything on this video.
We did.
No, on this one.
Oh.
Didn't read anything.
Well, yeah, but there's some interesting dialogue that I think should go on.
Yeah. Do you want, what I'm saying is, do you want to read a little and do you want to finish
can-
up, or do you
yeah,
want to just close up, or?
No, I can, so there'll be three of us. Is that the idea?
Sure.
Yeah, so we'll read just a little bit.
Okay. Have a great day, Melinda.
Yeah,
Bye, guys.
all right,
Thank-
bye-bye.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Anyway, Melissa, one of the things I was going to say in terms of some of those people that I mentioned in the 60s, what happened was those drugs were coming out and they were new. And and they went through the mild stuff pretty fast and they got to some of the heavier stuff. So some of the people I'm talking about were really products of some overdoses that just burned out
Yeah.
probably some of the connections to get back. So some of them, and this was a crash of stuff that came so fast into society at that point in time that I'm sure some of those places that they got put, because they did, they can't leave them all on the street. They
Right.
just,
But then they opened up the doors and put them all out on the street. So,
well, yeah.
like, when the deinstitutionalization came, it was like, all right, well, you're not supposed to be here, but we don't know where we're going to put you. So go ahead, go out. That was, it's and how many people maybe did those drugs to try to reach those levels, and like you said, just couldn't come back.
Well, what happened
From it. Yeah.
was let me see which, I'm not going to remember it was a really well-known singers. Their whole original premise, some of these early ones in the 60s, was their music was supposed to get them there. And this was what they were supposed to be doing. They ended up dead, some of them from overdoses that are really well known. I just don't remember their names. But very well-known rock group, whoever one of the leaders was. But that was the original intent. But then they, instead of going down a trip like this, which you go slow and you have something rational, they wanted to speed it up with drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And then more drugs and heavier drugs. And I mean, and we're talking 64 to 70 is a very short period of time for all that really came during that.
A lot happened during that time. Yeah, a lot happened during that time.
And that was interestingly enough, in these books, in one of these books, he says, and the last one was printed in 1950, we have an experiment coming in 1966, was what he said. Okay. Well, the 1966 was the beginning of that. And it was a very heavy transit. It was a Pluto-Uranus conjunction in Virgo. That's what came during that period of time. That's what that was all connected with as far as a transit globally. And, so things, there's your going too fast, because the drugs were, they got the experience, the out of mind experience, out of their normal range of mind that they were looking for, thinking this was some great place. Okay. When it was just a lot of chemistry. And the reason I say that is when you understand the process here, you don't want to put any extra chemistry in your system, because the chemistry gets made when you need it. So the last thing you want to do is upset the body chemistry you have so that it can't produce what it's supposed to.
Right. And I would feel like if you're adding drugs or whatever to your system to get to that chemistry, how can you trust it to be real? Does that make sense? Like, how can
Right.
you
No, that's
right, how can you trust that it's real and it's not just the drugs and like changing up your thought?
well, what happened then is they thought the drugs were going to get you there
Right.
because you're having a different experience. You're seeing something different. You're seeing what you think are different dimensions. I mean, basically, one of the things that was done at that time is you connected a screen that had different colors of patterns of light up to your it was just a record player or a recorder something, and then you could see the patterns of the music on the light show. And I mean, so they were having that on another version with chemistry and various drugs to get the mind to do the same thing, and they think they've arrived somewhere. They think they've had something, you know, and sure, it's jiggled them a little. It certainly take them out of the very, very narrow realm where they didn't realize it was anything else. And now they do, but it isn't this journey either, you know, and they're still doing that.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
know.
yeah.
Because this is about becoming more subtle, right? This is more subtle. This is not.
He would use the word sentient, would be one of the words he would use. And as he talks about going further up, your whole goal is to become more, and I'm not going to have the exact word, but you are becoming more sensitive to the subtleties of what that energy pattern is, because your mind right now in these lower 3 levels is frankly too gross, or too dense, or has too many veils on it, whatever, and it can't get through. So as you move up that chart, if you will, I'm always going to go back to the chart for sake of diagram. The change that's happening is you are absorbing and becoming those subtler levels, including them in your range. And then the key is to be able to become sensitive enough and discerning enough to figure out what information is on those levels. And so that's got to go slow. And that's why it does. And for the most part, it takes it's a long journey, you know, and it speeds up after the 3rd is what he says. It goes faster because now you're working in energies that are much more refined, but they have more communication levels between them than down here when you're dealing with dirt and those areas where you just can't pick up even emotional nuance or information, the I don't get it part. And they don't really get it yet because it just hasn't come there.
Yeah.
You know, so anyway, and it is it is a very slow level of refinement that's going on in that process. So, and you know, there's a lot of reasons for holding back. You get a lot of people in power who don't even know. You get some who do know and are deliberate, don't get me wrong, but you also get a group of people a lot of times who are voted in who don't look wacko. They look very stable. They probably are in terms of how we describe things. So they become the ones who hold society together, and then consequently they're the ones who are making the choices. And then you may get a whole bunch of corrupt ones. I think that happens every so often when we look through history. You know, if you knew all the stories, you would find that levels of corruption come along that take over the power base, and then you undo that at some point, and then somebody else comes in You know, maybe it changes and maybe it changes just a little, or I don't think we really got, I mean, the Victorian era was where we really got a little prudent, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You know, prior to that, there were some pretty wild parties. So,
That's true.
yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
we go.
yeah, it is. And, you know, the interesting part is you could take all of that astrology on a global level and you could look at it and you could see what's going on also. So, I mean, it's, and he will talk about that in probably esoteric astrology is where that is, because you're seeing all of the influences of all of the interplay of the planetary solar system type. Every so often, probably something coming from outside the solar system interjecting, because it is a symphony with a large orchestra.
And a lot
Cosmic,
of people still
yeah.
don't believe in it, though. Like believe in it or accept it. Like even we had like those 4 planets that were in retrograde at the same time. Was it 4? I think. And it was tangible, like the change, like you can feel, you know, and this was right around the time, Carla, right when we were about to meet for my birth chart or whatever, and it was the time, Donnie, that you had contacted me, like, hey, I want to do this for you, you know, and so all these shifts and I can feel it, and it was funny because things were happening at work and everything. I'm going, everybody, well, you know, Mercury's in retrograde, so we're gonna go through change, like we're gonna go through this, you know, and I would say it, and everyone just like would laugh, and then finally I'm like, look it up. Look it up, read it, learn about it. I'm telling you, this is what's happening. So some of them were just like, uh-oh. So I would have, like, every time something would go on, I actually have one of my coworkers, she'd send me something. She goes, look at this, look what's happening. I'm like, I told you, you guys got to pay attention to it. It's all connected. You don't think it is, and you know, but it is. So it's just funny how that all coincided with, you know, this, like for me, for this to the connection being made. And I think that has a lot to do with, for other people as well, as what their journeys are. It's just having somebody else just be like, hey, I noticed you're posting these things. There's somebody I want you to meet, or something I want to do for you. And you know, and it, you know, it's finding the people that will open those doors, or you know, windows, or at least unlock the door for you. And I think that's part of the slow process as well, because it's still, strangely enough, and this is why I say, you know, you know, how dare you people say that talking about the cosmos and astrology and where things are in alignment in the universe, how dare you say it's a bunch of, you know, woo woo, you know, like, you know, and it's so to have to wait till you're 45 years old to be like, no, there's actual literature. Like, I never heard of this, or Alice Bailey, or any of, like, and there's a lot of books, and you're like, it's been here for this long, and I'm only now finding out about it, you know. So like I said, I have a lot of emotions about that right now.
Yeah, better now than never.
Yeah, true. And like I have Donnie, you know my auntie, right? She lived down the shore too. She's crazy, blah, 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 blah. But there's a lot of stuff that her and I have had conversations about that are coming back now as we're talking about this. I'm like, she was talking about this like 10, 15, 20, if not longer ago. It's just a willingness to listen and be open to the information. And I think, again, when you're kind of told, you know, oh, she's, you know, she's the crazy one. She's, you know, she's the one that believes in this stuff, blah, 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 blah. And that goes in with my birth chart too, Carlos, that guilt feeling and all that other stuff that goes in there. So it's just working through all of that personally. So for some people, you're raised and this is okay and blah, 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 and open up your doors. And there's those of us that are like, oh, why are you straying? You know, straight, you know, stick in the straight line. Don't veer off the path that we've already paved for you. So, yeah, that brings up, this is, so I feel like I'm in the beginning of this process, but at the same time, I feel like there's been little introductions of all this to me in my lifetime.
Sure, it's been presented.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm enjoying this immensely. But I'm still getting the how dare you.
Oh, I
Well,
was so mad a couple of years. It really hurt. It did hurt me for a little while. It did. Like hurt. A lot of tears about that.
Yeah.
And then I felt like, well, I need to tell people. What am I going to do? And then I was wrong about what I knew. I didn't know what I was, but I wanted to go tell people, you know. So I would only say something like, when I knew that the Jews were blinded to spirituality, I was like, I got to go to Israel, or I got to go tell these people, man, look, dude, look, get over it now. Okay. We can do this, you know. And then I just got mad, and then I cried for a while. And then I looked around at all the people that I was around, and nobody was ever speaking one word to me about God, Jesus, not Christ, not one word. All day, it was silence, and it just ate at me so hard. And it made me look insane when I would say something, because it would settle in, it would build up. And then I would just be like, how are you people not talking about, we're spinning through the universe on a wet ball rock, and you're worried about that? Come on, man. Come on. What the heck is going on here? Bunch of nuts. But, and then it just slowly settled in. And now I think the love and compassion for the ignorance comes through somehow, you know, obviously it does. And then you just love everybody, and you're like, oh, you'll get there. I just try not to say too harsh of words to anybody and just be nice, you know.
Well, that's the point I think I'm getting to, like, and I think that's what kind of like clicked. I don't know if it was last week or the week before, when Carla, you know, I was just like, oh, wait a minute, we're not all getting there at the same time. So,
Well, the challenge for the military guys.
Yeah, and you have to sit back and accept that. It's accepting that not everyone is getting to the same place at the same time with learning, and knowing, and you have to accept that. And like you said, you just have to have compassion for a person, be like, all right, you'll get there. But I'm still very angry at people who are like so far from it. I got to get over those. Those are the emotions that pass through, like, you know, as I'm driving to work and I know what I'm going to be dealing with when I get to work, or, you know, if it's a big day, or being around a lot of people, like I've had to, you know, and it's, you know, having to move away from people in your life, you know, and what's not right for you. And you're like, all right, this isn't right for me, but not be able to understand why. So now I feel like I'm understanding it a little bit more as to why, just because we're just getting to different levels. And this, I mean, we're what, page 36, 37, and like already, and this is a big book.
Well, one of the sages says, you know, the ignorant push people to enlightenment, and then when you know, the ones who make it to enlightenment come back and get the ignorant, right? So it goes both ways. You can't have one without the other, right?
Right. Yeah, true. I mean, that's, you know, and that's a lot of what I do in my job too. You know, and being accepting and open to certain things, and then being able to process it myself and be able to bring it to the masses, so to speak, even though my masses are very small. You know, I do, you know, learning about things like emotional intelligence. And I think that's helped me in this process as well. Just doing that work for myself as well. Like not just all of this, but just learning the differences in people and where they're at and how to relate to people, I think has helped with knowing who and how and when is it, hey buddy,
Your aunt.
and when we're cousins.
Sorry.
The who and when and how and what to relay as far as information. I think that's helped a lot. Just learning what different types of people there are and what resonates with them and how it resonates, and you know how somebody learns versus how other, you know, some people can read things and get things, and some people need to sit and chat and talk it through, and that's helped, I think, in this process for me too. And it is a slow process, and you have to accept that it's slow. I get that, you know, like I said, I have to get over the fact that I guess technically we're middle-aged, and it's just coming to us now. Like, why couldn't I get this when I was younger? It would have saved me from so many things. But sometimes your experiences are necessary, I guess, to understand what's coming at us now. That's what I'm getting out of all of this. When I'm trying to figure it out, I have to like, all right, you know, we're here at this moment for a reason.
Yeah, and you go on forever
Yeah.
in reality,
Yeah.
in terms of in terms of time. I mean,
Yeah.
you're on this planet for a long time.
And it's as much a heaven as it is a hell.
Something like that.
More than sufficient hell, perfect and a sufficient heaven. That's what I just saw that a couple days ago. You know?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and it was, and it had something to do with the esotericism. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there's not much to say. This is
well,
what-
Rumi calls it the prison for drunks.
Oh, we used to just call that New York City.
Yeah.
I think when I was young, they would talk about New York City as the only place where the prisoners would basically lock themselves in or something to that effect. The prisoners, they were all prisoners, but they wouldn't leave or something to that effect. In other words, because that was really the only dense location in the United States then, was the density of New York City. Of course, now it's a little greater than that. But the only place where the prisoners would just keep going back to their cells. So, but well, I was gonna say when you start to understand who you are, and now I'm gonna go back to the chart for a minute, but when you start to understand who you are, and then your own timing and your own path, a lot of that goes away, I think, because you become in unison with you, and you work with you, and you work with all the parts, all the little parts and parcels that are sent to you via your transits that are meant for you. And you start to understand life and are far more comfortable with it. Certainly reduce a lot of stress.
Mhm.
I think you just have a better sense of, well, I'm on target for me. And that's the only one that's going to make you happy, is when you're on target for yourself. When your inner self and your outer self are starting to work together and not battling each other. So
Yeah.
that brings its own happiness. Your happiness comes when your physical, your emotional, and your mental natures work as one. That's happy. Joy is when you contact your soul. Bliss is when you contact the highest monadic or energy. And that's how we define those energy states, is through those three words: happiness, joy, and bliss.
I feel like language is such an important part of everything. Again, as I said before, we're told what something means, but in relation to what other people have experienced it to be. So our perceptions, I think, get skewed and changed, and language is so important. But at the same time, if you're talking to me and you're talking about the soul, somebody else is going to think of it as in a different way. Like I said, people will say, well, animals don't have souls, but if you've had a pet that you've loved or whatever, an animal that you've looked in their eyes and you're like, how can people say that? But they do. And and then I feel like today I kind of got a new definition of soul, or we've been working towards it, where I just see it differently now. It's not so it's personal, but it's not like, it's just not like what's in you. There's just like so much more to it. So everything's a learning process. It's a learning process. So there's a lot of, and I know Donnie told me this before, there's gonna be a lot of moments where you're like, oh, here we go. Like, new things are popping up, or some things are being brought up, and just like, oh, and then like you said, Carla, and then you take for a moment, and then you settle into it, and you're like, okay, and then let's get to the next thing. So I feel like that's something that I'll probably be sitting with me like all week.
Good. It'll work in.
Yeah, it'll all work in, and it'll be nice.
Yeah. Okay.
Enjoy the spring energy and stuff.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. I can't wait. Except for the coldness that's happening. I can't wait. Like, I really cannot wait for everything to. And it's, I can't wait, but I have to wait. It's not that I wanted to speed up, but I'm looking forward to it all. I can't wait for the spring, so we can get back out in the garden, get back out in the sunshine, and really see nature do its work.
Yeah. Well, it should happen pretty soon, shouldn't it?
Yeah. Hopefully. Yeah. I'm gonna try to bring Penny in so Liam can see Penny. Come here, love. Okay. Come here. I just want you to see your cousin. Come here.
What cousin?
This is. Say hi.
Hi.
Ah,
This is Donnie.
that's your cousin. Pretty cool, huh? I know. Hopefully you'll see her this summer.
I know. Hopefully, we'll probably get to see them. And then he has two sisters that are a little bit younger than you. Okay. All right. She's playing games.
So what do you want to do, Carla?
Well, I'm probably finished for today. What do you think?
Sure. Yeah, we have plenty to.
I feel like we go off into these wonderful conversations, but they're so helpful.
Yeah, well, I think they're very valuable, and I would think if other people are watching those conversations, it'll be a value to them too.
Yeah.
So
I think
not
because
just
it's so-
the material, but the conversations are equally as important. So
Absolutely.
Hey, everybody.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure. I guess we do it again next week, Carla.
Yes, we will,
Okay.
as always.
All right. Well, that sounds good. I guess we'll call it a video and then I'll end it for today.
All right.
I'll mark my page